Welcome to Families for Life with Bryan and Brian, a podcast of Oak Hill Baptist Church.
On today's episode, we are doing another pastor's perspective.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, Brian.
Hey, Brian, how's it going?
Good. Welcoming all of our listeners today. We had a couple episodes we put out. Everyone saw them, weekly. We recorded them in a block, and then we're doing that again today.
Yep.
So I'm excited about this pastor's perspective.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. I think, we heard some good feedback. We were hoping to be able to do more pastor's perspectives. It gives us a little bit more options, talk about more topics. And so today we're going to deal with some pretty, I think, I don't want to say intense, but definitely applicable to our current situation.
Yeah. Before we jump into that,
okay.
I do want to let everyone know we are getting ready to start a series. So
Yes.
we are going to do 2 episodes. We've enjoyed kind of breaking from our series.
Yeah.
We had a really long series over the summer on biblical manhood.
Right.
Now we're going to enter a series in 2 weeks on 2 or 1 week, whatever. It'll be the beginning of October, however it falls. And we are going to do the nature of the word.
Yeah.
So are you pretty excited about this?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, we talk about the Bible all the time. And I hope our listeners know that, we've always said the most important thing for believers is being in the Word.
Right.
So, what is the Word and what's the point? What is it doing? All of these things. And so I think we're going to do a 6-part series in that, but it'll be broken up into kind of 2-week sections. We've got some other things we want to do. Another pastor's perspective we'll do.
I truly believe that the theology, when it comes to the nature of the word, is the most important theological issue. Because if that is not solid and does not stand, no other theological tenet will be able to stand.
Right. Because people ask me all the time about different topics and stuff. And my first question to them is well, what do you believe about the Bible? Because all I'm going to do is tell you what God has told us. And if you don't agree with the Bible, then there's no, I can't help you, you know what I mean? So it's really important, especially parents, for you to teach your children what the Bible is and how God uses it in our life. It's vital to their spiritual walk.
So we're excited about that.
Yeah.
That's coming soon. But for today, we've got 3 topics. We're going to talk about the employment crisis that we have in the U.S. We're going to ask the question, where have all the church people gone?
Yep.
And then finally, we're going to talk about kids and streaming content, specifically focusing in on YouTube.
Yeah.
So let's talk about our first topic, Brian.
Yeah. So employment crisis and work ethic. I think most of our listeners will recognize this and be able to say, places are closing, businesses are out of business. There's a big problem here. People are having a really hard time getting work.
When I was on vacation recently, we went to a restaurant and walked in, and there was, just a handful of people sitting at seats, maybe 20 or so. And I was like, oh, great. It's not very packed.
Yeah.
I walk up and the hostess says, it's gonna be about 45 minutes. And I'm like, oh, well, we're going to go somewhere else. But I had a friend tell me that he went to a restaurant and there was one server serving the entire restaurant. So this employment crisis does seem to be targeted at certain industries. Not every industry is feeling
this way. That's right.
But when we talk about hospitality industries are definitely feeling it. Childcare industry is feeling it. Lots of the those kind of jobs in those areas are really hurting right now. And I know there are people in our churches that have businesses that are hurting. And so it's a really tough time. How do we react to that?
Yeah, I think first what we need to do is ask kind of why this is happening. Because I think there are it's not as simple as we might think, and we need to be careful not to just jump to conclusions. So we need to ask, why is it happening? And then we need to ask, how can we help prevent this, and or really, how do we help our children think through, the way that they should be thinking about work, especially if you have teenagers and things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think some of it is people feel like they're not getting paid enough, or they're getting assistance. They're getting assistance through other means, the government and things like that. And so that assistance is either comparable or maybe even some cases more than what they could make in a lower paying job.
Yeah, that's true. And so you've got several different factors going on here. Like you said, that people maybe aren't able to make as much, and so they're able to make more through assistance, things like that.
I also read that COVID fears are still playing into this. People are not wanting to be, a lot of these jobs are around people.
Right.
The jobs that are focused where you're interacting with people all day, or you're around a group of people a lot. I think those are the ones that are really suffering because there's still that fear.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear, and the way I kind of think about it is there are basically like, I kind of think about it as like legitimate, like real legitimate reasons why this is happening. For instance, like there are some businesses that have to close, not necessarily because people are just afraid, but because half of their employment is sick, so like they literally can't come to work. So that's a big problem. But then there's the other side where it's just like a hypersensitivity, and I don't want to say that's like illegitimate, but it is. It's not something that is necessarily keeping you from work, but it is something that if you're not paying attention to, you will push people past their limits.
Well, and that's, I read an article that said that, especially in the healthcare field right now, hospitals are suffering, and some nurses are having to work 24-hour shifts.
Exactly. That's exactly.
Well, it's technically not a 24-hour shift. It's here's what it is. You work 16 hours. They give you an 8-hour break to sleep, and then you go back to work.
Right. So
that's no kind of life. I mean, you can't
crazy.
Sustain that for any long period of time.
Well, and the workers, like one waiter serving an entire restaurant like that cannot last for long.
And so people are saying it's not worth it for me to do that.
Exactly.
I also think, Brian, I read another article that talked about the changes in priorities. People are realizing they can, time is short. We've all been confronted with our mortality through this, right?
Right.
So what are our priorities? Family. Spending time with things that you enjoy to kind of for your health and well-being. Yeah. And so I think some people are saying, man, I want to get out of the rat race because I want to be able to do things that really matter.
Yep.
That really leave that lasting impact.
So there's really, it's not all bad necessarily. But there are some negative things here, and we just need to make sure we think about it all. Do you think that any of this has to do with people's work ethic?
Yeah, I do see that a little bit. And I'll tell you one illustration, at our food pantry, we run a food pantry ministry. We've typically before the COVID crisis, we had a pretty steady number of clients that would come through. And even after that, we did a drive-through initially, food pantry, but before we knew all of the stuff we could do. Right. And we were doing really well there as well. So towards the end of last year, beginning of this year, things started to really fall off as the assistance from the government.
Right.
And ever since we've seen this child tax credit come into play, we've not had a lot of people with families come to the food. So you can read that a couple of different ways.
Right.
Maybe people are not needing the food pantry, but in my mind, I'm thinking the need is still out there.
Yeah.
People are accessing other resources and other means, whether they're getting compensated through this child tax credit and COVID relief or unemployment, whatever.
Right.
They don't need the assistance from us.
Well, and that's the thing that comes down to like some of the issues with that. The reason why we as pastors would be bothered by that is because you think of like one of the 7 letters written to the churches in the book of Revelation. One of the issues was that they were rich and they had come to the point where they did not need God.
Right.
They didn't feel like they needed God. And obviously it all comes from the Lord, but when you don't recognize that, and so when you're just when your need is being met, and this is for people who are, I'm talking about people who are working high paying jobs and people who are, in the hardest situations of life, but they're receiving assistance. It's easy to think that you don't need the Lord. And with our food pantry, we always have a spiritual emphasis there. There's always conversations and we're trying to point people back to, hey, we're here to help your physical need, but that's because God is the one who's here to take care of all of your needs, spiritual and physical.
Yeah.
So we're kind of missing out on that opportunity.
I think the church has to do put out there that there is a theology of work.
Yeah.
And I think that we miss that a lot of times. We're so focused on, and once again, this goes back to biblical balance. We need to have good family time. We need to have good rest. We need to have good rhythms. But part of that is also God wants us to work if we're able.
Yes.
And I do want to put that caveat in
Absolutely.
there. But if we're able, our work honors God.
Right.
And it's not so much about pay as it is about bringing glory and honor to the Lord with your work.
Yeah.
With your abilities, using your giftedness, using all the things that God has given you.
I've actually heard some theologians and professors and different people write articles and talk about the fact that, we have this idea that I go to work in order to pay for the life that I want.
Yes.
And really the idea is our work should be a part of our bringing glory to God, not just like the means to an end. It should be a part of, and that's helped me a lot. And in a fallen world, it's not perfect, but in the new heavens and new earth, we'll be working.
Yes, work was
and
established.
All of our work will be a part of our life.
Part of the theology is work. Work was established before the fall.
Exactly.
Now it was not late, because part of the curse is hard
is the
labor.
It's like work always fights you back, and that's the hard thing.
I say it like this: Adam and Eve still had to go out and collect the food in the Garden of Eden. That's work. They had to go out, and the food just didn't appear.
Right.
But it was easy. It was abundant. It was everywhere. Here's the thing, though. When the curse happened, when the fall happened, then they had to go actually plant the seeds, grow the crops. It wasn't the abundance that they had.
The way I think about it is, work can bring great joy. I mean, anyone who works a job, and you have that final, you do a project or you get something done and you get to look at it and say, there's a joy that comes from that. Well, that is what God designed.
Right.
And it's all the negative things, all the fighting back, the just constant, you just got to wrestle whatever into submission. That is from the fall.
Right.
And so in the new heavens and new earth, all that will be gone, but we will still work. We will still find joy in that.
And these are the things that we need to teach our children.
That's right.
These are the things early on we need to encourage them. My kids have chores and tasks and things that they need to do. And we actually don't do I know some parents do the allowance thing, and that's very successful. I'm not saying anything against that. We don't do that because we just say, listen, you're a part of this family.
Yeah.
Everyone contributes to this family.
Right.
And, you might have to do the dishes, or you might have to take out the trash, or, we train them very early on to do their own laundry,
Yeah.
and fold their laundry and
put it away. That's just going to help later on in life. I mean, good night.
So that's all a part of like building that work ethic in them, and trying to get them to see I'm not working necessarily. I'm not building a work ethic just to get money.
Right.
I'm building a work ethic because there's joy in work.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And another thing too is to help our children not disparage the low paying jobs.
Sure.
Because that's, all the different jobs that I've worked, they were not super high paying, but there was a great value in them. And
everything contributes to the society in that way.
Yeah, it all matters. It all matters. That's like disparaging. It's like the parts of the body in the church. The parts that maybe you don't see as being super significant.
Right.
You're not going to just cut them off.
Right.
And I think we often look at work in our society.
So let's wrap this up with a couple application things. I think it's really important for the Christian, especially when you go to a place a place that is struggling with employment right now.
Right.
Be very graceful.
Yes.
Be very patient, very loving.
Yep.
If you have the opportunity and the ability to tip extra,
that's
do
exactly
that.
What I was going to say.
But I'm telling you, the worst thing we can do as Christians is ruin our testimony by being frustrated and angry about a situation like that.
Well, I'll give a quickly perfect example. I went out to eat. I won't name the place. And it was closed inside, and I was really frustrated because I was like, no other business. There's no other businesses really that are closed inside. Like, why are you doing this? Blah blah blah. That was my personal opinion. And then somebody made the point. Well, maybe they just can't get the workers. And that was when I was like, oh, I need to be more graceful. Right. I didn't even think about that. And so we need to be remembering that it might not be because they don't want to serve you. It's because they can't, maybe.
Well, and that doesn't mean those businesses don't need our patronage, because
that's true.
Especially if you have a personal connection to a business in our community, let's try to patronize them, because they need our support in this season right now. And then, finally, I would just encourage families to think about work in a way that you're using it to honor the Lord and build that into your children. Don't make work a joyless,
only about the money. Yeah, don't do that. So, okay, well, let's move on to our next topic here. We are going to get into, and I do think this connects a little bit, the idea that the church people are kind of gone. Is that right?
Yeah. So I was reading, this is an article that just came out this month in Newsweek, and I'm going to read this. It's a little bit long, but I think it's important. It says, religious observance in America dropped to historic lows. This past March, Gallup reported that U.S. church attendance had for the first time fallen below the majority of the population. It is now at 47%. Worst hit have been the Roman Catholics, who in 2007 were 24% of the population. As of 2020, they ranked as 20.8%, according to Pew Research Center. That is, they sank from being 1/4 of all Americans to being 1/5. Evangelicals held on at 25.4% of the population, but the percentage of nones, those are people without religious affiliation, has climbed from 19.6% to a historic high of 22.8%.
So there are more people in America that affiliate themselves of having no religious affiliation. There are more of those people than there are Roman Catholics.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That is
and almost as many as evangelicals. Now, when we say evangelicals, that is a large swath of denominations.
Yeah. That's not like just Baptist or just, whatever. That's like,
I think every church, we've talked to many pastors, everyone's attendance is down.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Everyone's attendance has been hit by COVID. Now, some of it is there are people that are elderly, or they have like an illness, and they can't be around other people with COVID or the potential to get infected with COVID.
Autoimmune, problems. Yes.
Right. And so that's going to be a percentage of that group.
Right.
There's also just a group of people that have gotten out of the habit.
Yeah.
Right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. And you were even mentioning this article that you looked at that talks about the idea of getting back into a habit and how long it might take to get back.
Yeah, there was a lady who did an op-ed piece that she hadn't gone to church in about a year, and she was talking to her pastor, and she made the point that it takes 21 days to change a habit.
Right.
And so she hypothesized it may take me 21 Sundays to get back in the habit of church. Now, obviously that's not true, but she's using that as like a little bit of an exaggeration to say, hey, church, be patient with me.
Yes.
And so I hear that as a pastor.
Right.
And I want to acknowledge that for the church members or attendees and say, I will be patient.
Yes. And we do need to be patient with people, but we also need to encourage.
Right.
And we have to, and that's the hard thing, patience and encouragement. Patience does not simply mean, sit pat and do nothing. I think patience for people to come back and to continue to gather together, which is desirable and pleasing to the Lord. So like we have to encourage these things, and especially we see how much more we have to do that now because of how many people are dropped off. And I will say, so for those who again, like you said, are the senior adults or autoimmune issues like that, they are still connected. Like, so what I mean is, pastors and deacons are I hope in every church. I know in our church we've been trying really hard to be reaching out to those people, and there's always reciprocation. There's always a connection there, and always man, I miss my church. I mean, we heard a story of a lady who's just in tears because of how much she misses her church and just can't be here for different reasons. So there is a connection there, but then, like you're saying, there are the other people when you reach out to them, it's like, oh, I just haven't been back, and I'm not trying to be mean, but they're really, people don't even have excuses, much less reasons for why they're not coming back to church.
Well, I think they just gotten out of the habit of it. And so I think we need to encourage people to get back in the habit of it. We need to know, and the sad reality, and this is kind of a gut check for pastors, is if they can leave church for over a year and not miss it, then there's something that we did not make a strong connection with them in the first place. Do you know what I'm saying? Now I'm not laying it all on our feet, but as leaders, we've always got to turn it back around and look say, how can we improve?
I agree. Mm-hmm.
Once again, they have to make their own decisions. They have to do what they're going to do.
Yeah, there's mutual responsibility there. But I mean, but
our job is caring and shepherding for the body. And so we've always got to say, how can I do that better? How can I connect with people? What's it going to take for me to encourage them in their discipleship journey?
Well, I think that's what you said is, I think, an assumption that we have, that all pastors are thinking, like we need to be reaching out to people, even if we're assuming that they're just, have no reason or whatever. Cause we've talked to people and there's, like, oh, I'll just not in the habit. But then there's other people that you talk to and they tell you some stuff that you're like, wow, that's really hard. And we need to be praying for you. And then we need to set up food chains. We need to do these things. And so we can't just assume people are gone. We have to find out if they're actually, if they're gone, or if they're just needing some encouragement to come back.
Yeah, I read an interesting article from Baptist News that said the church is realizing something here, that people are not coming back.
Yeah.
And it says, it's kind of got a breakdown of, it says the super volunteers who used to carry 20 positions in the church are now looking to do just a few things. Mm-hmm. And Brian, that's not a bad thing. For the long time, the church leaned on too few people to do too much. And so that actually isn't a bad thing. But here's the thing. Our regular attenders are becoming semi-regular. So, I don't remember, but I think this is an old stat now, but I believe it was Lifeway Research found that if people come, I think it was like 2 Sundays a month.
2 Sundays a month.
They call themselves a regular church attender.
Yeah, so if you're regular in that sense, then what does semi-regular mean?
Well, I think then that would mean, once a month or a couple times every other month,
Yeah.
And then it says our fringe folks are fading away and people are not coming back to church the same level of engagement. And they ask the question, so what do we do?
Yeah.
What do we do?
I think that this comes about, there's a great book called The Reformed Pastor, and by, I think, is it Andrew Murray, I believe. And it's not about Reformed theology. It's about being a pastor who is always seeking to be reformed into the image of Christ and do what pastors are supposed to do. And in that book, it's an older book written, I think, in the 1800s. But he really just kind of breaks it down and is like, hey, if you've got over 100 people in your church, then you need more pastors to help you shepherd. You need to know what's going on in people's lives. You need to write letters to people. You need to be connected to people. And we've always said, and Pastor Allen here at our church has always said, ministry happens in relationships. And so we've got to tighten up relationships, because that's the thing that church is. It's about being in a relationship with God and being in a relationship with other people. And so if people are able to leave so easily, that's because there weren't that great of relationships. And so we've got to tighten those up, or we got to seek to make new ones. And so I think that's one big way.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. One of the things I was challenged this week, and from our message and from our discussion in our life group, we looked at the prophet Isaiah, and he was called to be faithful regardless. And many of the prophets were called to be faithful regardless of what the results, if no one in Israel repented, if no one turned back to God, they still had to be faithful.
Right.
And so I think in this season, pastors, Christian leaders, regular church members and attenders, we are called to be faithful, even if we're not seeing a great harvest of believers, or even if discipleship is really hard in this season. We're called to be faithful no matter what. And, we can't measure, our success should not be measured anyway by our attendance.
Right.
I think it's a good metric for us to kind of see where people are at. We can't live and die by the weekly attendance of the church. So I think we just have to be faithful.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah. That was a big deal for me when I was training for ministry, and just reading the Bible and finding out what God expected from me in being a Christian, much less a pastor. And just the idea of faithfulness, like God just wants us to do what he asks us to do. Yeah. He doesn't expect more from us. Like sometimes I think we expect more from ourselves than God does.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing sometimes like, why are you harder on yourself than God is? Mm-hmm. Like why, if God can forgive your sin, then why can't you, And
well, it's like we don't take seriously the things that God takes seriously, and the things that God doesn't so much care about, we take those things as premium seriousness.
And so for us, like if we're not packing out the house all the time or getting like 1 billion listeners all the time, we think that, we're failures. And we do need to pay attention. Like you said, it is a good metric to look at and make sure we're communicating properly, mm-hmm. And making sure that we are being faithful. But when we do look at that and recognize, okay, no, we look at the Bible and let the Bible, shape what we do.
Right.
Then we just do it.
Right. Yeah. So I think our encouragement to families especially would be continue to try to build these habits into your family.
Yes. Don't stop that.
We've said this before, your children need to know on Sundays it's the Lord's day.
Right.
Something needs to be different about that. It's not just another Saturday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sunday is not like going to church is not like anything else in your life.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be.
So I think that if you've been out of church for a while, there's no shame. You come back, we rejoice with you. And if anyone does make you feel shame or chastises you, then find a biblical believing church.
Mm-hmm.
I will rejoice with every person that comes back in these doors, because I get to see them, I get to fellowship them in person, even though I can communicate through social media, whatever. It's not the same.
It's not the same.
And so we've got to, that's my encouragement, I guess.
I agree. Yeah. That's a great statement, Brian. And I do want to just reiterate that, like, please know, like, if you're like, oh man, they're like, if you're listening to
talking
this,
about me.
Yeah. No, first of all, we're not talking about anybody in particular, because we get it, part of the thing for us is we're pastors. We're supposed to be here. You know what I mean? But, so we get it. It's hard. But just come back. We love you. And that's all that matters. So just come back.
Yeah, and we thank everyone that has faithfully served. You and I have many volunteers that we work with week in and week out.
Yeah.
And it just, I'm overwhelmed many times. I can't think about it too much because I'll get emotional.
Yeah.
But I'm overwhelmed by the sacrifices that they make and the time that they give. It's amazing.
Yeah. I'm so thankful for all of them, but we got one more thing.
One more topic. Okay.
So talking about the idea that kids are consuming videos and shows at an unparalleled rate. I mean, it's insane.
The streaming culture has changed. I was reflecting on this when we decided to do this topic, and I remember growing up. Now, I grew up in the age right on the cusp of like cable TV. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I was born in 1980, and so we had like the little wood grain box.
Oh yeah,
I don't know if you remember that.
Uh-huh.
And you had the channel, the clicker, and so you could hook in the cable box. But I remember growing up, we really only had kids programming on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And then as I got to be a little bit
cartoons.
That's right. As I got to be a little bit older, they started to find that kids were watching TV when they got home from school. So they started putting a block of TV on every afternoon from 3 to 4, 3 to 5, something like that. And they would have different shows on a couple different channels. And so you could watch PBS or you could watch ABC or whatever and see the different shows. Then as I kind of was on the very tail end of this because I was getting into teenage years, but they developed like these channels, Nickelodeon, Disney, I mean, all these things. And it was 24 hours a day, wall to wall.
It was just that
kids programming.
Right. That's basically what I grew up with. Cause I think you're like 9-10 years older than me. And so I grew up with those channels and I think I was like right at that change, and so like I grew up with, I remember I was pretty young when like SpongeBob first came out, and I thought that was weird, but then it became a craze. But like the channels were just normal, and so you just expect there's these kids channels, and then there's like other channels, and so the channels started becoming more specified,
right? And it was kind of like when you didn't have anything to do, or you were bored, or your parents wanted to get something done.
Right.
It's like you could go watch TV for an hour or whatever because it was always on.
Right.
And
exactly.
So that kind of began this mindset
of always having it available,
always having something available. Because people by nature always want more. Do you? I mean, we can see this not just in television or streaming, but people by nature sort of have this like addictive personality where we experience something and we always want more.
Yes. So yeah, because we desire glory. We want to see glory. And so like that is part of our design. We're designed to want glory. The thing is that we're designed to find it in God.
Right.
Because God's glory is infinite. You will always get more.
Right.
And so we're designed for that. And so we always want more, and we always want particular things. So with TV, for instance, movies, like you go to AMC or Turner Classic Movies, whatever. Well, you watch whatever movie's on. You don't get to choose the movie. You watch whatever movie's on, or you watch whatever TV show's on, and you have to wait until a certain time for a different movie. But even then, or a different day. And so that was all, constrained and people wanted different. And so then it became, you go to Blockbuster, you go rent movies, and you can do this and do that and yada, yada. And then came the streaming.
Yes. The streaming really has taken over, like we don't have regular cable or whatever. We have streaming apps and services. But to be honest, Brian, my kids would rather watch YouTube than anything else.
Yeah. And so
I mean, I can get them to watch a movie or a show a cage, like, hey, we're gonna have movie night, whatever. But if they're just gonna like turn something on, they're gonna put YouTube on.
I'll be honest with you. I'm more like that because content creators recognize that and are pushing content to YouTube. Right. YouTube used to be just funny whatever videos, and it still vastly is that. But now there is huge content being created simply for YouTube.
Right.
Shows
the kids programming is insane on YouTube. Do you think there's any danger in that, or do you think it's all...
I don't think it's all okay by any means. I don't think it's all bad though. Like I really don't. I think the problem is when you are able to all of the time, at any point in time, select whatever you want to watch. There's no limitation to you, okay? That is incredibly dangerous. There's no limitation to
just
how much
going,
you can
video
watch
after video after video
and
after
what
video.
you can watch. Right. That because if you do not have self-control because of our need for more and more and more and more, you will. I talk to the kids about it. I call it the YouTube vortex, where you just get sucked in.
Yeah.
And it's like you watched a 5-minute video, but 13 hours later you're watching,
well, there's no one to tell you.
Yeah,
there's no one to tell you unless your parents. There's no one to tell you that it's time to go to bed or it's time to turn it off. It's funny. My grandfather would tell me, like, at a certain time at night after the news or whatever, the late night show, whatever, the TV would like air that, like those colors and like me, off air.
Exactly.
Okay, time to go to bed.
Like I could not comprehend that.
Right.
That didn't make sense to me that there was a time where you couldn't watch TV.
Right. Yeah. And so now it's crazy that these kids have all access. And so that just means that we as parents have to step up and really take serious our role, because let me tell you my experience and a little bit of a few of the dangers. Number one, there's lots of great content out there. The problem is they start to YouTube will start to create an algorithm. They start to try to get to know you for the purpose of advertising to you. And that can be a little bit dangerous. Makes me feel like I'm in that Tom Cruise movie, Minority Report, where they're doing like specific they're scanning your retina and they're giving you specific advertising just for you. And so that can be a little bit kind of questioning. But even bigger than that, when we think about, our children are starting to see, like, for instance, let me give you an example here. You have these people that are doing unboxing shows.
Right.
They are sponsored by whatever. People send them toys and all this kind of stuff. And my littlest son thinks that we can just go get everything. He wants everything. He wants it all.
Oh, wow, that's crazy.
And so that's one problem. We've had to talk to him about that.
Like, it doesn't work like that.
And the other thing is he has seen people doing like video games or they're doing VR or whatever. And he's like, hey, I want to do that. I want to, because his latest thing is he wants his own YouTube channel. So we filmed a couple videos and threw them up on YouTube. Nothing crazy, just because he's silly. He's a 6-year-old silly kid. So they did a couple of stupid things. Some of our friends watched them. It's not a big deal. But he's like, well, I want to do a VR video game. I'm like, dude, we can't just go buy this whole VR setup,
right? Green
screen, camera. Like, you don't understand what it takes. This is high production value.
Yes. Yeah.
They're making you think that it's a mom and pop operation, but there's a high production
there's
value
actually
here.
These like studios that are making YouTube videos, and it makes you think like, I could do that.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, if you had, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so that's a good point. I think what you're saying is it builds this almost like an unrealistic world for our kids. Right. For us older, people who understand what's going on, we get it. You watch a Dude Perfect video and you recognize like they've got a huge production behind that. Whereas our kids see that and they think like they're just doing trick shots. It's like, no, there's a gigantic thing happening there.
Right.
Huh. That's a good point. Yeah. I think there's so many dangers, behind this, but really what it comes down to is, it can be a tool like YouTube and all of these things can be tools for use. Like I use YouTube for watching sermons, for watching really helpful biblical videos. I do all sorts
of
things.
How to, like, I need to change my brake pad.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Like I do that all the time. But I think YouTube can be a huge good medium for good art, good Christian content, good non-Christian content that's just good. But the issue is with any tool, like I don't just give my kid a hammer and say, here you go.
Go at it.
I think the problem is we assume that it's safe, and we need to be careful assuming that. We need to recognize our children don't have self-control.
Yeah.
And just because they're young.
Well, I think that if you give your kid a phone or a tablet or anything, you need to have parental controls engaged that will have like a time limit.
Yeah.
You need to set times. Some of them are very specific, even to apps, and say you can use this app,
right?
For this amount of time, this time of the day, even.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have to know what those are. You cannot just hand a kid a phone with no parental controls, no nothing. Because there's a double negative, sorry, but you can't just hand them their phone, because they will be totally locked in and engaged. And ultimately it's not just the addicting part of it, but they'll also see things that are not appropriate.
Yeah.
We just recently in the last few months installed the Bark app.
Yeah. You've told me about that.
And I think it's a great app. I think parents should utilize it, because it does help you track the content of YouTube videos, web searches, everything. So you don't see everything, but if something comes
anything
up
flagged,
anything that's flagged, you set up parameters. And I think it's very helpful, because I can see, my son watched a YouTube video about this or that, and I can help kind of guide that and make sure that we're watching what's appropriate.
Exactly. Because that's the thing I think we're getting at is, no, these things are not bad. Like watching Saturday morning cartoons, obviously not bad. Watching YouTube videos, not bad. It's are you doing it in self-control? Because again, that's, we've talked a lot about this with our digital invasion series.
Yeah, go back and listen to that.
Yeah, but that's a fruit of the Spirit, and so we need to be helping our children with that. We can't. This thing that drives me crazy about like modern parenting assumes children are as mature as adults.
Right.
That's insane.
Well, a lot of times, this is the whole point of this, is the limits back in the day were set. Mm-hmm. Now the gate,
there are no limits.
The gate has been blown open. There are no limits. So parents have to set the limits.
Right. Because that's really cool, because there's so much that can be done for the good, but we have to understand, and this is the problem with the secular worldview. It doesn't realize that the problem is in our very hearts.
Right.
It's in our DNA. And so unless we have the gospel fixing our hearts and producing the fruit of the Spirit, then we will use these amazing tools for great evil.
That's right. That's just true. God has never intended for us to have unlimited anything in this world. Do you know what I'm saying? And so, there's the thing. Even you can even get sick from drinking too much water.
Yeah, exactly.
We say water is a good thing. We need to drink water. Too much of it is bad.
That's exactly right.
And so I think that everything in this world, everything in life needs to be done and this is what I think the Holy Spirit drives us to, is self-control. That's one of the fruits of the Spirit.
That's right.
Is discipline and self-control. Our kids will not naturally be drawn to that. Right. We have to teach them.
You grow up into that. Even as adult believers, we still are growing into that.
Right.
I am.
I think it's good every so often people take, and this was encouraged in our digital invasion series, to take a fast from media for a day, or even a morning, and say, this would be a great habit. Sunday morning.
Yeah.
We're not going to get on the TV. We're not going to get on YouTube or whatever. We're going to get up, eat breakfast together. We might put on some worship music in the background. We're just going to enjoy ourselves as a family, get ready for church, go to church together, go home, eat lunch, and then, in the afternoon, do whatever you want. But at least you
got to get your football.
In. But at least you're having a time where you're breaking from that in your week.
Yeah, because you're just applying self-control.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. And I think, so we got to help our kids with that. And pastors, we've got to be living that out, and, we've got to be helping our church members do that.
Right.
So.
Mm-hmm. It's good.
So we hope that you are liking these pastors' perspectives. We're going to keep doing these. So if you like them, let us know.
Sprinkle
comment,
throughout.
Do all that stuff.
If there's any topics that you want us to discuss, let us know.
Let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts and things like that. So anyways.
Well,
thanks for
listening. That's it. We'll see you next time. They have those pizzas prepared, but they sell out really quick. You got to get them first thing in the morning. You know, they'll make up 20 pizzas or something, not many. So, and then they're gone.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And then they gone. Okay. I did a bunch of work. Did you see yesterday?
No, I haven't looked at it. No.
Why do I even work? Why do I even do things?
I do a lot of other things on Wednesdays.
Oh, please. Wednesday. It's your easy day. What do you got going on Wednesdays? Absolutely nothing.
Anyways.
Order the pizza.
Oh my God.
Come up with a crowd breaker. You're fine.
And that's it. Done.